Spencer Turkin. I'm one of the volunteers for the program committee here. I'm also the voice of North Carolina A&T Athletics over in Greensboro, North Carolina. Appreciate everybody being here in Winston-Salem this morning. We have a really fun panel that's about to get set. We're going to be talking about social media branding. And as everybody knows that's in this room, you pretty much cannot be in sports without being on social media. Unless you're Neil Everett and you just retire from SportsCenter and you refuse to go on Twitter. So he might have made the right decision. We'll discuss that. But as he rides off into the sunset, it's an interesting topic. Social media it's a curious place these days. And we'll discuss it. We have three great panelists here to talk about that. We will start with Nabias Wilburn from AL.com. Nubias Wilburn from AL.com. We also have Alyssa Orange, and we have Michael Phillips. So without further ado, I'll let everybody make an opening statement, and then we'll get started. We'll also take some questions from the field here and let some folks get their thoughts into the mix here. So we'll have a microphone that goes around in case anybody wants to ask any questions. But without further ado, we'll start with a opening statement.
Well, good afternoon. Good morning, it's afternoon. So hope everybody's doing well. Basically for me with social media, the way I look at it is a way for you as a journalist or whatever your thing is that you're doing in sports media to communicate directly with your readers, your listeners, your viewers, or whatever it is. I guess at some point we'll be zapping the information to people's brains in the next 5 years, right? So mainly have fun with social media, engage, and hopefully we'll have fun talking about practices and things that can help you out as you guys go along your careers.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think another big thing is balance and making sure that on social media you balance exactly what your audience wants to see from what you're reporting to, you as a person as well. And that's really important to have that balance in social media so that people can connect with you as a journalist, but also connect with you as a human. Thus, they want to read your pieces. They want to watch you because they have that relationship of connection. And it's not just posting about only the journalistic side, and there's a human behind that.
I love that. So there's two functions here. One is for you, the reporter, the TV person, to build your brand and build yourself up, and then two is for the company to drive audience, to drive revenue, to drive attention to what you do. And I think a lot of times the two coincide really well. And I know you probably get supported in your social media efforts by the station that you break it down. Though I'm sure we'll talk about this, like Facebook. I don't build the brand on Facebook. That's not the place to build the brand. But that's where the clicks come from for the newspaper. You put a story on Facebook, somebody shares it with their grandma, somebody shares it down the line, TikTok, Instagram, like nobody's clicking links off of those, but those are important places for us to be, to build the brand, to build what we do. I always tell people, I say, the advice for social media is be yourself for 99% of people. For 1% of people, don't be yourself. It is the exact opposite. But for most people, be yourself, put yourself out there, and people respond to that authenticness and genuineness.
Michael, I think you have another microphone.
I do, and I don't think it's turned off. Hello?
If you just flip the switch up, we'll be good.
I can do it.
Perfect.
How about now?
Yeah, we got you. Awesome. We are in business. So I want to hear from everybody here. What social media platforms are they on professionally? And do they have any that they're on only personally?
Well, Twitter, and if you guys want to go on there, it's nwilborn19. That's my Twitter, if you guys want to give me a follow. Also IG. Do a little TikTok. I'm not as TikTok-y as other people. And I have Facebook where I have a professional page. So pretty much now for me, all my social media, it's all just work related. I still have a Snapchat page, I just have it because I've had it. And so yeah, basically for me, all the social media is somewhat professional. Because at a certain point, when you become somewhat of a semi-public figure, even if you have a quote unquote burner, it's not really a burner. Unless you're for Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I think Twitter is the big platform that I'm on. I'm just at Alyssa Orange on Twitter. I have an Instagram. I'm just not a picture taker, so I'm just really bad at that platform, and I need to be better at it. I let my younger kids in my department run our TikTok, so hopefully they don't post any bad things. I also don't really have a TikTok, but I think Twitter is the big sports platform. I think if you were to poll the news in general, Facebook is still the #1 news outlet for things like articles, but if you were to talk to just a sports panel, I think Twitter is where you're going to get your most interaction from a sports side.
I think that
yeah,
I'm
you
good
have
now. How about that? I think that's why people are torn up about the changes to Twitter, right? Because it's immediate, it's during the game, and now you'll log on Monday and it'll be like, bottom of the 7th, it's 3-2. This tweet is 21 hours old. Like that's the one at the top of the time frame. So they seem to be doing their very best to ruin it for us. But until there's an alternative, I still think that's the way to go. I think I'd be curious to hear from you, Alyssa, at the newspaper side of things, like it's less important that I be a personality. So I have an Instagram that's just my kids, the things we do, our vacations, and that's private. That's just, there's 100 people on that. And then the Twitter's very professional. Here's what's going on. Here's what I think about the Commanders today. But I think in the TV world, those lines are a lot blurrier. You probably, you want to put yourself out there, but also not too far, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think something that's big for us. So I work at the NBC affiliates in Fayetteville and Little Rock, Arkansas, and so we just cover the Razorbacks. And I have a 5-person sports team, and we're the Pig Trail Nation. I say that because obviously I represent the Pig Trail Nation as a brand with our company, but then I also represent myself. And so for me and my people, I think it's important not only to be professional with our Pig Trail brand and our coverage, and that's what's important with our Pig Trail page. But then we also have our own individual Twitter pages and such that I think it's important for those people who are also on my team to build their own brand. We have a 75-year-old man on our staff who has been covering the Razorbacks for 45 years, and he's got 15,000 followers, and people just love Mike Irwin because he's built that brand over time. And I think it's important as an engagement so that people know us as a entity and a coverage of the Razorbacks, but also as people. And so that's why that's important for us. And I think we have a really good balance of we're going to tweet at games, we're going to tweet opinions, we're going to tweet information, but then, I might put a picture of my kid playing soccer or something like that, or an occasional Florida State tweet, because that's my alma mater and it's not in the SEC, and I can kind of get away with being a Florida State fan sometimes. So it's a fun balance there that I think people really respond well to.
Not in the SEC yet.
Yet.
Oh, okay. Oh,
They're
wow.
not. I think they ruined it for us, but it's never going to happen.
Well, I mean, mentioning the Twitter thing, so, one of the things they took away the proverbial blue check and the whole thing with that, right? And, I felt a little bit of a way about it, so I guess the thing would be, how are you guys dealing with the whole not verified thing anymore? And have you been duped as far as things you've seen from other reporters that maybe you didn't realize it wasn't their page, or have you had people try to dupe you?
I've been lucky. I haven't retweeted fake Woj yet. So fake Schefter. It's coming. I know it is. Because you pay your money, you get the blue check. To me, it's one of the harms of social media. We're professionals. It's our job to be in the locker room, to build those relationships, to tell the stories. And yet when you're on Instagram, our picture runs the same size as dude at home spouting off opinions. Like, there's no here's an important opinion, here's an unimportant opinion. And I feel that way with the news too. Like, you've got, crazy things happening in Russia, and 43-year-old penguin dies at the Richmond Zoo. Like, those occupy the same, they look the exact same on Facebook. There's no and that was part of the newspaper back in the day, right? This is on page 1. This is a big story. The penguin's on page 5. That's an appropriate place for the penguin. We don't curate it anymore. It's just a big old fire hose shooting at you 24/7. So I think it can be hard to, and we're all guilty of this, breaking, this just in, because those words grab attention, but being careful to use them in a way that you're not abusing them as well.
As you use your social media, in the age of real-time scores and updates via mobile apps, is there a need to tweet play-by-play while you're still sitting there, or is it more about trying to find a different angle and tell a different story in real time?
Well, we were doing that probably 4 years ago, and we've slowly gotten away from the play-by-play aspect. I think, especially with what Michael was saying, the algorithm is so wacky right now that it's out of order anyways. It's hard to follow, and then it just really bogs down your feed. So if you were to go to the Big Trail Nation feed in the middle of a Razorback football game, you got to scroll through about 55 tweets to get to anything else that's other than football. And we were learning that you weren't getting the interaction there. You weren't getting the traction or the likes, and this feels really monotonous. Instead, it's, the occasional KJ Jefferson just threw a 55-yard touchdown to Rocket Sanders. Those two have been hooking up 5 times this game. So then you can kind of maybe tweet something that's informational, but then add commentary to it. And that's gotten more traction as opposed to just KJ Jefferson to Rocket Sanders touchdown.
Well, for me, it's interesting because one of the things that the outlet that I won the award with does live updates during the game through our website, right? And so how do you have time to do live updates on the website, which is ultimately where they want you to click, and then also put that same stuff on Twitter? So for me, when I'm doing live updates or even a running gamer, sometimes you just don't have as much time to do the Twitter thing as much. So I miss it because I do think that's good interaction because, believe it or not, there are some people who don't watch the game live, and they do maybe go look on the timeline to see what people are saying. So I missed that and hadn't really found the real way to replace that yet, other than steering people towards the website, other things, still using Twitter, but say, hey, if you want a running tab of the game, click here.
Now, how do you balance the responsibility, and I'll use that word, and please challenge me if you need to, of driving folks to your websites as someone who's employed by a news organization and providing free content of some sort on the social media platforms?
And that's the friction, because I want to get hired by the New York Times eventually, so I want to build my brand, put myself out there. They want me to send people to the website and buy subscriptions, right? So there's absolutely that friction there. Your stuff needs to be good enough that people will seek it out. If you got the goods, you got the goods at the end of the day. I mean, we're talking about different ways to package it. So I'm also the sports editor at our place, and when we're hiring people, I'll look at their social media. I don't care about volume. If you tweet a lot, if you tweet a little, if you tweet play-by-play from a game, if you don't, some people use it as their notebook, and will write it down as they go. I don't think that inherently disrupts our audience. I don't have an opinion about that. I don't want to see you arguing with people in the comments. That's a red flag.
You just opened up a huge Pandora's box that I think we need to talk about, and that is how you interact with others. Twitter's not always the nicest place. It
isn't?
Right, you don't get Valentine's Day cards from there, and Christmas cards and whatnot. But so how do you balance those negative comments or even those non-pertinent comments that have some charge behind them?
And that's not to say never respond to them. That's not to say don't quote people and embarrass them when they need to be embarrassed. But when I pull it up and your Twitter is 20 tweets of it was a good play at third base. No, it was that's not you're going down to their level now. But yeah, I think to your point, and as a woman, you probably deal with it a lot more than I deal with it. I'd be curious to hear, how do you, it's tough to just let that stuff bounce off of you, that can stick with you.
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did. No, you're good. Well, I think that's important too, is just understanding that sometimes you can say things, but it's more important to say little. I mean, people are just going to be people, and trolls on Twitter, they're just going to exist. And sometimes I think you can have a conversation, even if it's 2 different opinions with someone on Twitter. But once the personal attacks get in, you just gotta let it go. At the end of the day, I have to remind myself, by responding, you're giving that person a platform, and you might as well just not give them a platform.
Well,
I want to say a word about politics, too. One of our writers, the night Donald Trump got elected, tweeted, "This is worse than 9/11." And it doesn't matter how you feel about either of those events. If you're that mad, put down the phone, say it to somebody in the room. Don't put it on your blue check mark name for the world to see.
well, my experience on Twitter is, one, just being African American, particularly covering some of the beats I've covered, working in Alabama, then before that in Pittsburgh, some other places where, I was the first African American writer to cover the Pirates for the Post-Gazette, for instance. The Post-Gazette's covered the Pirates for over 100 years, all right? So you can imagine a little bit of friction I've got, dealing with people. So, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a wrestling promoter who basically had a rule for the wrestlers. This will make sense, all right? The rule was you shouldn't get into bar fights, but if you do, you better win, all right? And so if you are going to get in the muck of Twitter, you better win. But also do it in a way where you're not using profanity, where you're not causing harm, where you're not hurting other people just to get back at that person. So if I'm going to engage, I don't get into physical insults about their looks or anything like that. Although I did compare one guy to his dog, but that was a long time ago. We don't do that anymore. But but here's the thing about that story, and I'm going to use that for a story. For instance, when I was covering the Pirates, a guy went in on me. There's a right-wing sports reporter that people may be familiar with, Clay Travis. Okay, he said something about something I wrote. His sycophant fans got in my mentions. One of them kind of went a little extra, called me the N-word that isn't my name, and so I said he had a picture with him and his girlfriend and his dog. I was like, oh, well, the dog is definitely the more attractive person in this picture, but you clearly are less attractive than anyone, especially with your attitude. Now, he took that message, not the stuff he said, just that one thing, sent it to the team, and said he will never buy tickets again as long as I work for, now, of course, I didn't work for the team. But my point is what happens when you get down there and you wrestle with pigs, the pigs likes it, and you get dirty. So always remember that part of it. You get dirty, and the pig likes it. So don't wrestle the pig.
There is no secret sauce to this, right? Like everybody deals with it in their own way that they feel comfortable dealing with it, and I think that that's important. But to your point, you do have to make sure that you're going to win it, because if you don't, then things like that happen, and it causes you problems where you need to work. And that's the last thing you want, is for someone who you don't know, who really has little meaning in the grand scheme of it, to ruin your place of employment and the workplace environment that you have to work in.
And I will also say this. There aren't a lot of things that are more humbling as an adult than to get called in the principal's office, meaning your job, your editor, whomever, publisher, particularly if you work at a brand, and some of these conversations can get pretty high up, and you walk in and have a printout of your tweets. And you're like, oh, well, I was misunderstood. And then you go back and say, oh, so how were you misunderstood when you said you were going to strangle that guy? Well, I did it metaphorically. That doesn't go very well, okay? And I'm saying it's not worth it to get called to the principal's office over tweets. So just keep that in mind. But, there are times you can defend yourself. Just do it cautiously.
I also think, too, you have to understand the company's social media policies. I have an example that happened this past football season where Arkansas had 2 football players who were arrested for disorderly conduct at night, and the description from the police report said one thing. They were suspended from the team for a week and came back. Then dashboard or vest camera stuff came out, and it was how it was described in the police report was very different from what happened. It was very much like they were. It's got whole opinions on it. Again, social media, your opinions. And so just to say the way it was described, like they were in the middle of the street causing a ruckus, bro was a step off the curb. I mean, it was very, anyways, long story short, the video came out and I was like, I feel like this video is not indicative of what was explained in the police report. And I quote tweeted that. I was like, I don't really feel like this, by watching it as a person, is exactly what we were told when the police report came out. And I got called into the office and it was like, you have to take that tweet down. Because I had a lot of people that were like, Alyssa, thank you for saying your opinion. You know, thank you for coming out and saying that you think this is wrong, because I did. I felt like it was not indicative of what was explained. And I got called in and they were like, you have to take that tweet down. And I was like, well, that's how I feel. It's like, it breaks our social media policy. I was like, what social media policy? And they're like, well, the one that says you can't comment on investigations, or you can't make a comment on things like that. And so it's like, okay, so I had to take it down. I still felt the way that I felt about it, but I couldn't put it up there because of Nexstar social media policy. And so sometimes there is that balance of like, my company is going to tell me what I can and can't say about certain things that are happening that are, you know, not necessarily national news, but local news that we report on, because it is important in some areas to remain unbiased. But then again, you have to still stand for something and have an opinion. And it's a really weird dynamic to feel like, well, this, I personally feel this way, but now I'm being told by a company I can't say that. It's a very interesting dynamic sometimes with social media policy, but they have those policies in place so that people just don't go absolutely wild and still remain employed. It's very interesting how all that works.
How do you balance internally, knowing that you're covering college athletes who are 18 to, well, in this day and age, 27, but but even with covering college now, you're covering kids who are in the middle of recruitment. So you could be covering people who are 14, 15 years old, knowing that sometimes these people are going to make mistakes, but they are young people. How do you balance that when you're posting about things on social media, knowing that once they're there, they don't go away?
For the college writers.
Well, geez. You know, that's a tough one. There's the Twitter joke's like, poorly describe your job. And I'm like, yeah, I DM teenagers about their college plans, right? I mean, but yo, seriously, hey guy, where are you going to school? So if you just put it a certain way, it sounds way worse than what it is. So, you know, you have to consider that. But it's also part of the job. You're talking to younger people about what they want to do with their lives, right? That being said, I try to give what I would have wanted when I was a young man. What I would have wanted when I was 18 or 19, which is only 2 or 3 years ago. You know, that's what I would have wanted, somebody to give me the benefit of the doubt, be thorough, the same way you would as a journalist, right? I mean, we're journalists. We're people who are thorough. We say what happened. And so you try to keep it to what, if it is a thing, that's a police report. There's a police report attached to it, and it's something I would write, I write it. It's just what it is, and then I just say, this is what the police are saying happened. The person had to say it also, I make it clear. The police said this, not me. That's what they're saying. If we have more information, we come back to it. Just try to be fair and polite, like I would want if it were me.
Yeah, I think to kind of build off of that, twofold. First and foremost, going back to just covering kids, always remembering that you're a human also, and it's almost kind of like relationships with coaches, relationships with players. You want them not to just see you as a media member who is doing their job, but also as a person. That I'm a human being. I'm not out to just get everybody because I happen to work in the media. And sometimes I think, especially right now, there's a lot of negativity towards our industry and our job, and people forget that we're humans. And so looking at it from a human lens of, I still have to do my job, but you can do that with compassion and integrity and not just in a cold way. But then going back to having a police report, you need a paper trail. You need something concrete to stand on when you have those things. Just out of curiosity, and this is just the most recent thing we've dealt with, has anyone known about Cade Renfro, Arkansas quarterback? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Great, that's awesome that you don't. So it kind of made national news. There was a quarterback at Arkansas who was accused of sexual assault. And someone created an Instagram page called Cade Renfro is a Rapist. It got spread on social media. National people picked it up. If we want to get into the weeds, he transferred from Ole Miss. He's like the 4th string quarterback at Arkansas. He transferred when Kendall Briles was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas. It was real deep, if you can follow along. The problem is I can't report anything because I don't have a paper trail. So I FOIA Arkansas PD, Fayetteville PD, Oxford PD, Ole Miss PD, Stephenville PD, because he's from Stephenville, Texas. There is no open investigation or closed investigation on Cade Renfro, on Austin Cade Renfro. So I can't report these things because I don't have a police report. I don't have a paper trail. And they're like, well, so news took, well, this is happening. So all I can say is this Instagram account exists. This is what the Instagram account is saying. And then this is what the university has put out as a statement with Cade Renfro. But it's like, well, what about these victims? I don't have a victim right now. Not that I don't believe these people, but I don't have a paper trail. And until I have a paper trail and a police report to stand behind, my reporting has lost integrity because I just can't give people platforms without something that protects us. And I think that's something, it's been very tricky to deal with because then people will say, for example, Cade Renfro did a sit-down interview with one of our stations in Abilene, Texas, and that went viral. His lawyer gave him a platform and he was able to sit down and talk to someone. I can't have a victim come on and talk to us until there's a police report. And then when I do that interview, I have to then, whatever they tell me, compare it to said police report and make sure it matches. There's so much more to reporting instead of people are so quick to be like, well, you said you put Cade Renfro, but you haven't given any victims a platform. It's like, that's not true. I just don't have a platform to give them right now. It's a very tricky thing with social media, and people will attack you on social media about it, but you kind of have to protect yourself when you're doing that kind of reporting.
People don't realize how high the bar is to get something out there. Like, I have so many Dan Snyder stories. We could go all day. I can't get any of them in the newspaper, though, because it's just something a guy told me at a bar one time. And I believe them, all of them.
You probably should.
Large body of evidence there. But that doesn't mean I can just put it in the newspaper. Here's the thing a guy told me at the bar last night. You wouldn't believe this story. There's a very high bar, and when you see something, out there, it's been vetted.
But that's why Kevin Durant has a burner account.
That's what you're I would just, to build on this, I would say another issue here is a lot of players, pro players, college players, high school players, believe we are not needed anymore. They have an Instagram, they have a TikTok, they are their own media, they are their own outlet. And I don't think we should poo-poo that. I think in a lot of ways they're right. They have more ways to get their message directly to people than ever before. I think that's a very real thing we have to work with and grasp how we evolve as a result of that change.
I think just kind of one comment on that is, I think that's why it's so important to be that unbiased level of information, because they can put out whatever they want to. But as an athlete, they have a storyline. I'm not going to say they always have an agenda, but they have a perception that we all want to keep. The universities do it the same way. Yeah, nobody at the university put out a story about Cade Renfro. There's no need to do that. But that's what we're here for. We're the ones who are covering firings, things that are happening, things that players don't want to talk about sometimes, that coaches don't want to talk about sometimes, things that are real. that they're not going to put out there because that makes them look bad, but we still have to tell things and be a journalist at the end of the day.
Well, several things there. I mean, on the players not being needed, us not being needed, it's always interesting how they call us when they want their charity stuff out there, or they call us when they want their, they win some award or something like that. And they call us then, or when they get in trouble, right? And they don't want you to report certain things. It's funny how they find your number then, they need you then. So I would challenge that back and say, no, we're needed now more than ever because there's so much information out there. Because everybody thinks that they're a journalist just because they can open up a Twitter account and say things. Ultimately, now more than ever, good information is needed. And it does start on social media. But with that, yes, you do have to be careful how you comment, what you say, even what tweets you may like. You know what I'm saying? You may like a tweet because you're trying to bookmark it. Now it's perceived as you're agreeing or disagreeing with that particular thing or not. So I say all that to say, there's still a way to do this. There's still a way to do this ethically and right. You just have to make those choices for yourself. But it's out there to be had.
There's also, we need to learn from them too. How many of you guys saw the Tennessee Titans schedule release video this year? Do you know?
That was hilarious.
There were two. When the schedule was released at 8 o'clock, they put out one that they must have spent $200,000 on. It was a band on Broadway playing with the schedule, like clips of the city. That's not the one you saw. The one you saw, they put out a couple hours later, and it was bachelorette parties trying to identify football logos, and it was amazing. It was great, and it probably cost them. It probably cost him $10 to make that.
Right, with a free intern going around Broadway.
That's the one we remember.
Right. In the days of NIL now, and players sometimes being paid for appearances and sometimes thinking that they should be paid for interviews. How are you dealing with that, especially with social media? And then after this topic, I do want to open up for a few questions.
I'd be curious if Nubias has an opinion.
I mean, look, we don't do that. I mean, it's just what it is. It's just plain and simple. We don't do that. Go holler at On3 or Rivals or 24/7. That's what you want to do. Yeah. And I'm not, by the way, anybody who works at those companies, I'm not knocking them or anything. I'm just saying that they have clearly decided they're going to play the game differently than how quote-unquote traditional media plays it. And does that mean I may miss out on an interview or two? Absolutely. Does that mean, and I get it. Hey, kid, if you want to get paid, get paid. We just don't do that, and I have to be okay with that. It's not easy, but game is game.
I think that's what's kept protecting us is that the NIL interviews and doing things. For example, KJ Jefferson could be being paid X amount of money to go on said radio show every week. Well, that NIL deal with the radio show in there and in any NIL deal, it does not trump other media obligations as the quarterback for the Arkansas Razorbacks, which means you still have to go to press conferences. Yeah. You can still have a sit-down interview with me because it's still part of your obligated role as the quarterback of Arkansas. You still have to do interviews. You can't just be like, oh, well, 103, The Buzz pays me, and so I'm not talking to anybody else but them. That's not how that works. And so that's protected journalists a little bit in college, that we can still talk to KJ and it's not an exclusivity right with anyone else because he still has to talk to us.
Well, how does some schools, SIDs, aren't as proactive as fulfilling requests as others? How is Arkansas with that?
They're pretty great in terms of access. They have a balance, right? So you're looking at an SID who's getting requests from me, from 3 other television stations, 10 other radio stations, the SEC network, ESPN, everybody else. And so there definitely is a balance there. On top of, they now have Hogs Plus, which is a streaming service that you can pay $7.99 for, and they do like KJ Jefferson did one interview after he decided he was going to return for his senior year, and he did it with Hogs Plus. And so he sat down with Hogs Plus and he did that. And I can use parts of that, but it's on their streaming service. So on top of everyone else's requests, they now have their own streaming service where they can do stories and they can do that. So they don't need us to tell the story. They got Hogs Plus to do it. Side note, my husband's the general manager of Hogs Plus, so I do get a little bit of insight, and it's a weird conflict of interest a little bit.
Although don't get me started on when you pitch the school a story, then it magically ends up on their website. But
Yeah,
that's a whole conversation.
been there. But all to say that Arkansas has been really good at trying to continue to keep that balance and allowing us to do some stories, but not every story. We're not miking up Sam Pittman at practice anytime soon. So.
Just as a quick counterpoint to that, I don't mind some of these NIL paid interviews because I think that the school has known the value of them for a long time and has taken that from the players. I don't mind seeing the players reclaiming some of that as their own revenue instead of the school taking it from them.
I have one more thing.
Yeah, please.
And I would love to get your takes on it both, is phrasing in social media posts. For example, during the football season, after Arkansas, I think they played LSU, and it just wrecked, LSU's defensive line just wrecked havoc on the offensive line. And Ricky Stromberg was asked afterwards about a certain player for LSU. And in his answer of, game planning, we didn't really have a game plan. For him specifically, it was just more as an offensive line, we were supposed to know where he was at all times, yada, yada, and he goes into this thing. Well, one of our young reporters who writes for a website, all his articles said, Ricky Stromberg on so-and-so, we didn't have a game plan. Okay, that is not what he said. And so it is so important. I screenshotted that and I sent it to Kyle. I was like, this is so bad. Like, this is bad. That is not what he said. Because you made Ricky Stromberg sound like he said, we didn't have a game plan. We didn't have one. And that's not what he said. He said, we didn't have a game plan for him specifically. And that's so, so important that you represent the athletes in that way to where you have integrity and it's not just clickbait. I guarantee you, Homeboy got a lot of clicks on that. And then they realized, okay, that's not what he said. But there are people who didn't click and read the full article and just made comments and retweeted it. And Sam's an idiot because they didn't have a game plan. It's like, that's not what he said. And so it's so important with phrasing to make sure that if you have a hot take quote, that you are representing the athlete as best as possible in that quote.
The funny thing is, he actually did say what the game plan was after he said there wasn't a plan. Because he actually said, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. But again, if you're just looking for the hot take, you can slice up a quote any way you want to. And here's the thing. If you decide to do the hot takey thing, you can do it for a while. You'll get some clicks. You'll get your name out there. Eventually, nobody in that locker room is going to trust you. Nobody in that coaching staff is going to trust you. Nobody around, whether it's a pro team or a college team or high school, none of your sources are going to trust you because you're that person who intentionally misconstrues people's words. And that will kill your career quicker than anything.
I don't like tweeting during an interview or a press conference because if you are tweeting, you are not listening. And an interview should be an engaged back and forth. That probably, if he was listening instead of writing, there's some really good follow-up questions there. Like, why did you choose to just treat him as another member of the defense? And so we could have a good conversation about this. Now, sometimes, I'll know through texting, at the coach's press conference today, he's going to say so-and-so's hurt, it's under wraps. Until then, I'll get the tweet ready, I'll hit the button. But if you're tweeting, you're not listening. The other thing I would say is, I tell my writers this, if you have a good story, I want a link on it. Twitter's not paying you.
Yeah, this was a headline. This was the name of the story. To click on the link and it was bad.
That's crazy. So we had a writer who, one of our colleges hired an assistant coach, and he tweeted out, they hired an assistant coach. End of the day, where's the story? And he said, oh, I tweeted it. I said, what? I hope your Twitter paycheck on Friday looks good, because I don't know what you're doing during the one here. Twitter ain't putting food on the table.
Well, one thing I know we've always tried to do with stuff like that, and sometimes it is tough with breaking news, right? Because let's be real, if you got it, 9 times 10 somebody else is going to have it too. So we do try to have a story, particularly something you're kind of working on, you know they're going to hire an assistant coach. You've already got things kind of worked out to where you have that story ready. So when you tweet, it's right there, or at least you have the tweet and then the story's coming like no more than 5 or 10 minutes behind it. Because once you tweet it, you know, especially if you're recognized on your beat, it's going to make the rounds. So you want to have a story very quickly so that the website can get it to you. You still get credit for breaking it on the web, and that does matter. Ask Woj or Shams or whoever you like, or Schefter or whomever. That part matters, but it also matters to get your paycheck.
I think for us, we prep, and I'm sure you all do too, is, for example, Thursday night, NBA draft. Arkansas had 4 potential picks. I had drafts for every single one of them. Nick Smith Jr. drafted by blank, and for the 6th overall, whatever. And all I had to do was plug it, push it out, because we have push alerts on our stuff. But we did not, as a Pig Trail Nation, just type out Anthony Black drafted 6th overall by the Orlando Magic. We then put that link in there and sent out that link. And so just being proactive like that and having stories ready, then you're immediately, we tweeted it 2 minutes after it happened, but that's quick enough for people because you need to be accurate. But then it also has a link. So preparation and that kind of stuff is important too. And now we're pushing back to the website, and we make our editors happy.
The other part of it is that Schefter and Woj, they're not just tweeting. They're then going on their 24-hour-a-day station and then following it up with a story. So they're doing that part. It might not seem like it based off their social media, but they are. They are completing the follow-up. I believe we have time for a question from the audience, literally one. So if you do not get your question in the room, feel free to come on up after.
I know we started a little late.
We did, so this one
you
got
can
cut a
find
little
us in
short.
the
So,
hall here. We'll stick around
yeah.
a little bit.
So let's see, questions. We'll go right here in the front real quick.
No pressure, but this is the question.
Your name and where you're from.
Meyer Lee, I'm with CT Insider. Thank you all for coming out to talk to us. All right, so the question I have is, Alyssa, you really piqued my interest in terms of like branding and whatnot and making sure you're putting yourself out there. I know as a writer, we're very like closed and we're like, we don't want to push ourselves and stay professional as much as we can. But my question for you all is, how, when you using these platforms, what's the most effective way you can continue to build your brand? Like, how are you all doing that, and how you effectively using those different platforms to build your brand? And I think that's the thing for me. That's what's on my mind.
Well, I think, it's kind of like, what do you want your brand to be? And I think once you answer that question, it's really easy to mold around it. So my brand, as someone who's covered the Razorbacks for 10 years, I'm someone who has tenure now in the market, but I'm also a mom and a wife. And so you want your brand to be whatever it is. And so I kind of am able to build a brand around, like, I have information, and my information that I tweet out is supported because of the relationships and such, and the brand as a Razorback person who covers them in the media. But also, I tweet about my kids, and I tweet about my husband, and I'm a mom. And so you can mold that brand into whatever it is that you want to be. And so if you're a writer who also loves to rock climb, you can be that on social media and have that balance and build that brand. But it goes back to just integrity, accuracy, and being really smart with social media in order to build that brand so people have that respect for you as a journalist and then as a human.
I think there's some media that lend themselves to that and some that don't. TV's the king of that. I had a friend who had a very well listened to radio show for years and years and years, then got a TV show. Everywhere he goes now, people are recognized. I'm sure you get it at the grocery store, wherever. Like, oh my gosh, how are the Razorbacks going to do? You're on TV. I think podcast would be number 2 there. You listen to a podcast, you feel like you know the person. People come up to me, start talking to me like they know me because they've heard me on a podcast. And it's that It's a much more intimate relationship with the reader and the viewer and the listener. Radio and newspaper on the bottom of that spectrum, where the conveying of the information is much more important than the person doing it. On TV, you're choosing who is going to give you the information, whereas in a newspaper print situation, you're choosing what information, the quality of the information more so. That I didn't phrase that quite right. Both are very important, but it's two different lanes.
And you feel like in print, that is the podcast is the way that writers.
It's an equalizer. It's an equalizer in a lot of ways. People know who Alyssa is if she walks down the street in Arkansas. People don't know who I am if I walk down the street in Richmond. But when you're on the podcast, people can get to know you a little more. You can be yourself a little more. And you want to be yourself. I can tell you're in the 99%. You want to be yourself. You're good. You want to be yourself. You want to put yourself out there. That enhances your ability to deliver the news. It doesn't detract from it.
Have fun. Don't do anything stupid. Don't get in trouble. No, I'm serious, because a lot of it's just going to be simple, right? A lot of it's going to be you post things that make sense, as far as you can time your post for things that may hit at certain times, and there's all types of practices and things that we could get into. But the main thing is be yourself, have fun. That's it. I know we got to roll.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time this morning. Congratulations on your awards. Coming up next, radio play-by-play. We're going to be painting a picture with words, so we hope you'll join us for the next panel. Thank you very much.